Yes, yes.
All right, thank you for that. How about the opposition? We do business. Are you guys here and complete?
Yep.
Yes, we are here and complete.
All right. So before we move forward for this round, want to just congratulate everyone for reaching this far to the Novice finals. Congratulations, guys. To I would give a like span of moment for both houses, the proposition and opposition, to like give a little bit of general introduction, or like general introduction for their own houses, for example. Can we have proposition, anyone from the proposition, to give a brief general introduction from their house?
Uh, Introductions, I guess our team, we're really glad to make it this far. I just want to give like a shout out to my teacher, Madam Giovanna, who teached us how to debate. We've came really far, and because we're beginners, we're really grateful to be here in the finals. So yeah, I think that's just a short introduction for our team.
All right, thank you for that. How about for the opposition? We do business. May we have anyone from the opposition?
All right, thank you. First of all, me and my team members would like to express our deepest gratitude for giving us the opportunity to perform till the finals. And we'll also like to take this opportunity to thank our friends, parents, and teachers who have helped us all to get here today. And yeah, we are also beginners, so we are very much grateful to be here today.
Thank you for that. Adding to that, we would also like to thank the organization, like the outcome of this, and of course the caps. Thank you guys for making this really good tournaments for everyone. All right. So before we formally start this round, let me introduce the panelists for this round. We have Judge Ankit, Judge Chloe, Judge Liwi, and Judge Mio Arif. Can you guys introduce yourselves? Let's start from Judge Ankit.
Hi everyone, it's me Ankit, no gender preference, and firstly, congratulations for reaching to Novice finals and good luck for the debate as well.
Let's have Judge Chloe.
Hi everyone, my name is Chloe. Good luck for the round.
Then third would be Judge Liwi.
Hi, my name is Dewey. You can address us as a panel. Good luck to both teams.
And then last but not the least, we have Judge Mior.
Hi everyone, I'm Mio Arif. Congratulations for reaching this far and good luck on the finals.
All right, thank you for those introductions. Before we move forward or like formally start this round, few reminders. One, please state your preferred pronouns and POIs before you start your speech. Two, I highly encourage you guys, both proposition and opposition, to at least raise one POI and receive one POI for a better engagement for this round. Thirdly, please observe a proper decorum, respect everyone else within this room. Fourthly would be you're only given 8 minutes, 8 minutes to deliver your speech, and of course, 4 minutes to deliver your reply speech. And then to formally start this round, motion goes like this. This house regrets the grow together narrative within romantic relationships. To formally start this round, let's have Prime Minister, you're here.
I'm audible, right?
Yeah, clear and loud.
All right. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. From the earliest days of dating, from sending each other birth letters to romantic relationships are often just portrayed as this kind of opportunity for personal growth. Because when partners are expected to build one another up and help each other evolve, Now, this existing narrative, known as the growing together, has become fabricated in society's perceptions of love. Now, this is not something that should be overlooked, no matter how harmless it seems. So that's why on our proposition, we tell you that relationships are in fact not perfect, but there's always a boundary and a line to it. We're very proud to propose this one. What is our stance on proposition then? Number one, we believe that the romantic relationship should not be framed as vehicles for a self-improvement where each partner bears the responsibilities to fix or to complete the other. But secondly, we acknowledge that the mutual support is important on our side too, but we contend that the grow together narrative distorts this kind of support that leads to a counterproductive, unhealthy dependency. So before I move on to my two arguments, Ren, I want to do a case setup on our side of the house. So what does regretting the grow together narrative means on our side? On our side, we tell that the romantic relationship should not be expected to follow this path because this sort of narrative, it reinforces the idea that a relationship should only be successful if both partners experience the significant growth through each other. Now, we're not saying that growth is inherently bad, but what we do say is that the growth should be organic and an individual process that actually has respect for yourself and not something that is defined or demanded by a structure of a certain relationship. So yes, couples may still support each other in their life, but the expectation that growth must come through the relationship and this defines success is deeply flawed at the end of the day. We think that there's a limit that couples should really go for. But second thing to note, we think that this is a value judgment debate, so both sides must weigh whether the perceived benefits of encouraging growth through a relationship outweighs the hidden pressures and the potential harmful state too. On our side, we contend that personal growth should not be tethered to romantic entanglement, but it is a far healthier for individuals to pursue their own development independently. Moving on to my first argument then about the principle of autonomy and the emotional self-sufficiency. Because if we see the premise, right, in status quo, this kind of narrative, it places the undue emotional and the psychological pressure on couples because what you see in your partner is something that you have to accept and you have to grow with it together. And from the beginning of the relationship, all of these individuals are just told that they should expect to improve their partner or to be improved themselves just because your partner doesn't accept you. So what this does, it places the focus on what's wrong or incomplete in each individual's rather than what is already good. So why do we think this is a problem then? We think it's for three reasons. Firstly, when you actually make a partner responsible for their growth, individuals are less likely to focus on their personal needs and aspirations. They may even defend their self-improvement, waiting for a relationship to just simply fulfill it. And secondly, this narrative just puts the undue pressure on their partners because now, instead of finding strength in their individuality, they're now expected to be each other's source of development. So when this expectation is unmet and it's counterproductive, what it leads to is disappointment and frustration, or even the self-blame on yourself just because your partner can't even accept you. That's why relationship must be a place of obligation and not an emotional freedom, right? Then, secondly, romantic relationships are not inherently about growth in itself. They're about the connection, the affection, and the partnership you actually get with your partner. Because we can tell you that growth may happen naturally, where you institutionalize it as the goal that distorts the core value of love and companionship. That's why it equates success in love with success in personal change. So at a principle level, we tell you that this narrative itself erodes the autonomy of individuals, which turning them into a vehicles for each other's personal growth, where you rather than allowing them to flourish independently. So why is this comparatively better than the proposition? Because we, at least on our side, we have relationships built on emotional stability and mutual respect, where each individual's growth happens outside the confines of a real partnership. We recognize that yes, self-improvement is a personal journey that should not be, dependent on a romantic partner's presence. But on their side, no matter what or no matter who your partner is, the moment you meet them, you're likely to be forced by this societal narrative that no matter what you do, you have to stay to prove that you love them. And love is unconditional, but when it comes to the cost of your health and your happiness, your financial status, or even your goals, it's a better option to leave. Moving on to my second argument then about the practical benefits of individual-centered growth. Because let me just walk you through what we actually do on our side of the house. On our side, the counterfactual is that we have an alternate vision for relationships that is at least more sustainable and it's realistic for all involved. Because what we do contend here is that relationships should be built on a mutual respect and support. We still have that on our side. Opposition cannot say that we don't. But with each partner maintaining their own identity and growth trajectory outside the relationship. So what this does is actually leads to a more healthy relationship, a more balanced relationship, to say a more neutral relationship. So what do we think by this? Because first, by rejecting the grow together narrative, at least on our side, we relieve the relationship of the pressure to be transformative. Instead of constantly expecting improvement from your own partners, now these individuals, they are free to love one another for who they are and not what they might become, right? So what this does is, it gives a more genuine, a less conditional connection between your partners. So now they are valued for their intrinsic qualities and not for their potential to change. Yes, accepted.
You keep mentioning on how this narrative will stop the individuals to flourish independently. However, this is completely counterfactual because this is just the worst case scenario that you're pointing out. However, you are dismissing the best case scenario for this. Please prove this point.
Do note that in status quo, if you were to have like a relationship that it's like the growth together narrative, you're of course going to be likely to follow your siblings. I mean, sorry, your partner's expectations. So I don't think it's likely that that's the worst case scenario, right? So secondly, this narrative often masks the incompatibility, because now when people stays in relationships with the hopes that or they or their partner will grow into the ideal match, they're just going to ignore the red flags you have in your own partner or their deep-seated differences they have deep down. So as a result, on their side, individuals, they're going to, even though it sounds corny, it's going to waste time in their relationships that are going to be fundamentally unsuited to their own needs and their own desires. Relationship should not be that fact that you have to match with someone who doesn't match your need or desires. Relationship is something where you actually have to grow together and be happy together. It's not this forced narrative where you actually have to say that, oh, my partner is imperfect, I'm going to stay with whoever. No, thank you. So how does our side provide a better alternative then? Because when we actually reject this narrative, what we do is have a healthier relationship on our side of the house. Because where love and respect is not contingent on personal growth, individuals now can assess relationships based on their compatibility and their emotional fulfillment in the present, and not an imaginary future of mutual improvement. That's why we have more authentic connections on our side of the house. But let us be charitable. Maybe the opposition might tell you that the growing together narrative, it helps couples, to overcome all of these challenges, to stay committed in the long run, because that's what you have to do. Your partner may not be perfect at the end of the day. That's how love works, right? But we tell you that the commitment built on the pressure to grow is inherently fragile. We don't think that outweighs the benefits of how exactly you're going to suffer at the end of the day. So that's why we tell you it's better to leave first, right? When you're forced to stay no matter what, you don't really, you don't really go through this happiness that you want to have. You don't have the desires that you actually want. You're forced to accept this kind of partner that doesn't match your favorite movies, your favorite songs. Maybe, sure, yeah, love, you can say that that's going to be the case, but then at the end of the day, if you cannot find a partner that doesn't necessarily meet your needs, I think it's going to make you more sad at the end of the day. So that's why the impact is clear on our side. When we actually reject this narrative, we actually empower these individuals to seek relationships based on their genuine compatibility. I'm sure that there's someone out there in the world that can actually match you. That is the relationship that you should have. Note that love is something you don't have to sacrifice your own desires and self goals to actually be happy. We are very proud to propose.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To formally open up the oppositional side, calling upon leader opposition. Here.
Yes, I'm here. Am I audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
All right, thank you. I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A very good morning, I bid to the wise panel of judges, precise timekeepers, and members of the bloc from the government and the opposition team. Before I get into my speech, allow me to give the definition as to what the opposition side thinks about the motion given today. Now, we from the opposition firmly refute every argument that has been provided by the government side, and we are here to prove as to why we do not regret the grow together narrative within romantic relationships, because in the end, the destination is not important, but the journey is. Now, allow me to define what we from the opposition think about growing together and romantic relationships. Now, by romantic relationships, we define romantic relationships as mutual or ongoing voluntary interaction, expressions of affection and intimacy. Now, this is something that the government team has failed to prove, and this is because they don't have voluntary interaction between the partners. Now, we are talking about the long-term effects when we are going to be speaking about the grow together narrative. And why is this so important? Now, let me talk about the current status quo of the society today. Now, in this society, whereby in Malaysia we are speaking, there are 1 in 4 people in Malaysia that are still single. Now, taking this into account, Why is that so? What is the main reason behind this? This is because most of them are afraid of commitment. And the only way to overcome this is by the grow together perspective. And this is because usually people in this generation, they tend to prioritize commitment. They don't tend to prioritize commitment and only see it as something temporary. And this is what the government side is trying to prove. They are taking commitment as
Point,
something
please.
for a short temporary time. No, thank you. They're taking commitment as something for a short temporary time. And they are proving as if even though the time frame maybe it will take a longer time frame to reach that place, but in the end, what both sides can agree on is that we both want a fruitful outcome in the relationship. So why does the time frame even matter, ladies and gentlemen? Now, allow me to move on to the first argument for today. Navigate through ensuring that we all implement the grow together narrative within the romantic relationships, we would be navigating the misunderstanding in the relationship really well. Now, why is it important that we navigate misunderstandings in the relationship? And this is because that is the only way for them to ensure that they have self-respect for them as well. Now, this is something that has been stated by the government side. The government side keep proving as to saying that this would as by accepting the grow together narrative, they would be sacrificing themselves. However, they would only be sacrificing themselves if they don't have mutual understanding in the relationship. And the only way for them to achieve mutual understanding is by growing together. And growing together ensures that we can navigate misunderstandings well. And this ensures that we don't lose self-respect for ourselves. If we are able to be stable and committed with our partner and we don't have any misunderstandings, obviously we wouldn't disregard ourselves as well. And this goes two ways. Now, it can also, the second thing, the mechanism that the opposition has provided for this is number one, having a couple counseling session so that partners can learn more about themselves. Now, let us look at the current status quo of the society. Everybody has their own flaws. And what do we call it in the current society? Everybody has their own red flags. So therefore, through this narrative of grow together, these red flags would never be a barrier for them any longer to achieve the stability that they need in their relationships. And therefore, there won't be any other misunderstandings that happen. This is because if any misunderstanding happens, the issues can be solved. And the mechanism that's provided is through counseling sessions, so that counseling sessions are basically the base of the growing together narrative. Yes, the opposition might argue and say, the government might argue and say that they don't have the time to go through this. However, couple counseling sessions don't need to be done regularly. In fact, it is a one-time thing.
Point, please.
Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to complete this. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, simply through these counseling sessions, we can grow together and understand better. And yes, I did mention that it is a one-time thing, but I didn't mention that the end goals of it are short-term. The end goals of it are for a long-term relationship, and that is the base that we are trying to cover for today. Now, as I've mentioned about navigating misunderstanding. Secondly, this relationship, through this grow together narrative, we can achieve a fruitful outcome. Now, why is it so important that we need a fruitful outcome in our relationship? And the government team has also agreed to this as well. So why do we need it? This is to ensure that the relationship wasn't a waste of time. Now, the government might argue and say that taking a long time to understand your partner by growing together and depending on them, that is a waste of time. But it will be a waste of time only if you reject yourself from understanding your partner, and in the end, you are married to a person that you don't understand. Now, that is a waste of time, ladies and gentlemen. Wasting your time on somebody that you completely don't understand and ending up spending your entire life with them. That is the true meaning of waste of time. We have, through this narrative, we can ensure that this connection is not a fling, and it is a sacred connection as well. Because knowing somebody deep down is always going to ensure that we have a fruitful outcome, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what is the mechanism that we have provided on the opposition side? Number one, it emphasizes on communication, something that the government still lacks. This is because as we do not grow together, as the couples are going to be flourishing separately and independently, they would never have a sense of communication. Why is communication important? This is because of mutual growth. Instead of growing separately, instead of not knowing each other, why don't we grow together instead? By growing together, we will ensure that we do not put them on a pedestal. And as the government said, that there are going to be chances of them to be disappointed by their couples. This won't happen if we understand them completely. Therefore, us on the opposition side would be able to prove that this fruitful outcome is possible because we wouldn't be putting them on a pedestal. Since we have fostered good communication by them. And the second mechanism that we will be providing is the courses for relationship as well as an example, marriage course. And this will ensure that the couples will understand each other more better and they would be given a better chance to grow together more effectively. Now, allow me to move on to the rebuttals. First of all, as to what the government has said, it will be putting the partner on a pedestal, but which I've already rebutted and saying that it is actually for our side. They are actually proving a justification of point on our side. And secondly, they will be facing psychological pressure. However, psychological pressures can be overcome through mutual understanding. And this is through the causes that we have already stated in our mechanism. And thirdly, they said that they would be forcefully accepting their partner. However, how would they be forcefully accepting their partner if they already know their partner as a whole? If they do not grow together, only then they would need to forcefully accept the flaws of their partner. And this is why we from the opposition firmly reaffirm our stand as to why the grown together narrative within romantic relationships is very important. Thank you.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To give their extensions from the propositional side, calling upon Deputy Prime Minister.
Am I audible at this moment?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Clear and loud.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, I fundamentally disagree with opposition's idealized vision of relationships as these places where people are expected to go together. They romanticize the concept of evolving with your partner, but what they have failed to see is that this narrative often leads to emotional burden, dependency, and such unrealistic expectations. Let me tell you here, the whole opposition's entire case collapses the moment they argue that growing together is the key of successful relationship. What I have failed to recognize here is that this approach places undue pressure on individuals to be the source of the partner's personal growth, rather than actually focusing on their own self-development. As soon as they support the grow together narrative, they lost the whole debate because they reinforce a mindset of dependency that often harms both individual and the relationship itself. Our case is already very simple. Already emphasized by our first speaker, individuals should focus on personal growth independently before entering relationships, not rely on their partner to shape who they become. We've already told you that self-sufficiency, emotional stability, and maturity decline are the foundation of a healthy relationship. Instead of putting the weight of growth on one another, people should come into relationships fully aware of themselves. But the go together mindset, it encourages emotional strain and often leads to resentment where one partner cannot meet the other's unrealistic expectations just for improvement. Do not try to let side opposition fool you into thinking that personal growth within a relationship is always helpful or beneficial. We've already demonstrated that how the grow together narrative can lead to more emotional burdens and dependency that ultimately strain the relationship. Their side here refuses to engage with us with the long-term emotional toll this narrative places on individuals. In contrast, we on our side, we argue that personal growth is best achieved independently, creating a more stronger foundation for a more fulfilling relationship. Now, 3 things my speech rebuttals against their side, 1 argument for our side, and number 3, word comparison and summarization. Now, for our rebuttals, let me first address 3 key points for the opposition side. Now, number 1, the false idea of growth together. Now, the side opposition suggests that growing together strengthens bonds. But what happens when one partner outgrows the other? Until when? We think this sets up a whole unrealistic expectation that both individuals will always grow at the same pace. At the same pace. But life is not linear. This leads to a dissatisfaction when one person feels stuck or resented for not changing as quickly, breeding frustrations, and eventually tearing the whole relationship apart. Mutual understanding can always be achieved by growing together. False. It is only achieved after each partner has done the work to improve themselves. And second of all, they argue that this narrative builds resilience. But in many cases, I tell you, one partner ends up doing the whole emotional heavy lifting, becoming the constant fixer or motivator in relationship. This whole unequal emotional labor decline exhausts one person rather than actually creating a more balanced partnership. This narrative does not account for the unfair toll on individuals who are expected to grow their partner. Now, let me tell you here, when will one partner decided when the relationship doesn't work? Because if you expect this in a marriage, let's say, one of them will literally suffer in the end of the day. Now, number three, individual growth is not secondary. Lastly, they technically claim that the journey of growth together is quite rewarding. But what this completely overlooks is that people should prioritize on their own development independently. Tying your own personal growth to a romantic relationship means that if the relationship completely fails, your self-esteem or progress can crumble with it. Relying too much on your partner for personal improvement can be super detrimental in the whole long run. Even if it's true that some growth can happen within a relationship, but we have to understand that this growth decline is often compromised by emotional baggage. Why? Because we tell you, because relying on someone else for your own self-development often blurs the line between personal growth and the relationship demands. This leads to more complicating desires where individuals suppress their own aspirations or emotional needs just for the sake of maintaining harmony in the relationship. Even if there's some improvement, it's often at the cost of personal autonomy and emotional well-being. Already emphasized by our first speaker, commitment can still work to our side. It's not about who you're with. It's not about someone who you actually rely with. It's technically symmetrical on both sides here. Now, moving on to our rebuttals then, why growth should be done more separately. The core issues with the grow together narrative is that it leads to emotional dependency and places undue pressure on both partners. Now, let me tell you here, when individuals enter a relationship expecting their partner to guide them toward personal growth, they subconsciously shift the responsibility of their own development completely onto someone else. This whole problem arises because the grow together narrative encourages the belief that relationships are a tool for self-improvement. Instead of fostering independence and emotional maturity, this whole mindset teaches individuals to completely rely on their partner for validation, guidance, and growth. This very much often happens in relationship when one person feels compelled to mold themselves up into becoming the perfect partner, which can create emotional strain on both sides. In practice, this whole narrative leads to a relationship where one partners become emotionally dependent on the other, except.
All right, you said they will subconsciously shift their own development onto someone else. However, we from the opposition have already clearly stated in our definition, whereby romantic relationships, it means a more voluntary interaction, and therefore they are willing to do so for their partner in the terms of love. Can you justify this?
Now, let me tell you here. Now, if you really say something like that, everything of this can create a super imbalanced relationship where partners can take all the role of mentors of themselves, the whole emotional caretakers, rather than actually being equal. Now, let me tell you, you cannot expect me or you to have a girlfriend or boyfriend and expecting them to completely rely on them for the whole time until when? Until you die or something. Now, over time, this whole dynamic erodes the relationship's foundation, making it more harder for individuals to actually address their own needs without sacrificing their actual personal growth. Now, the biggest impact here is that the emotional burden of growing together often leads to a relationship burnout. Both partners here may feel exhausted by the constant need to improve each other. Instead of being a source of support, the relationship becomes a source of stress. Furthermore, we tell you here, individuals may suppress their own personal goals or emotional needs in favor of what's best for the relationship, leading to long-term dissatisfaction and resentment. Even if there are some moments of mutual growth in some relationship, the long-term emotional cost of relying on your partner for self-development far outweighs any short-term benefits. On our side, individuals can work themselves independently and bring their full mature themselves into the relationship. This can lead to a more healthier, more fulfilling partnerships. But on your side, they perpetuate emotional strain and dependency, creating a more fragile relationship dynamic. At the end of the day, our side would be very more better because individuals are encouraged to go independently, ensuring that they enter relationship as emotionally mature and self-aware partners. Let me tell you here, this can foster a healthy dynamic where both partners can support each other without being responsible for each other's personal development. We can avoid emotional dependency that often comes with the grow together narrative. But on your side, relationship becomes a place of pressure and unrealistic expectations where partners rely on each other for personal growth. So what I mean here is that this often leads to more resentment, emotional strain, and the eventual collapse of the whole relationship. Their side perpetuates the harmful idea that relationships should always be about molding yourself into someone your partner needs rather than actually being your authentic themselves. Note that everyone gets into relationships without knowing that one person properly. The delta here is that our loved ones leave when they know that their partner is bad, they're not perfect, no matter the harm. This flags out your previous PR that I've already explained earlier. So we've already proved you today that the grow together narrative creates a more emotional strain and dependency in relationships, leading to more long-term dissatisfaction and burnout. We've already demonstrated by me and my first speaker that relationships should always be built on emotional independence and personal growth should always be achieved more separately. We have already shown you that the expectation of mutual places undue pressure on both partners, turning relationships into sources of emotional stress rather than actual support. This is very important to note because healthy relationships should always enhance your life, not burden it with the weight of your personal development. Individuals must always be allowed to grow independently, free from the expectation that the partner will fix them. So let me tell you here, the grow together narrative may seem romantic, but in reality, it's a recipe for emotional exhaustion and dependence. So let me tell you here, let's build relationships on self-awareness and mutual support, not the false promise of growth through struggle, in which our world will prevail in the end of the day. For all of these reasons, so proud to propose Start with SAS.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To extend the oppositional side, calling upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
All right, give me a minute. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we focus on the journey, not the destination, not achieving perfection, but getting better. Thank you, Minister. A very good afternoon to the honorable adjudicators, timekeepers, worthy opponents, fellow members of the government team, my teammates on the opposition team, and let's not forget members of the House. The motion for today is that this House regrets the growing together narrative. However, we from the opposition strongly disagree with the motion given. Now, before I get to my arguments, allow me to tell you why the points provided by the government do not have strong grounds. Now, first, they talked about how people would be focused on changing their partner, and people will be unhappy because their partners don't accept them. But doesn't this prove that the relationship is flawed? If a partner doesn't accept the other, the relationship is already flawed, and they don't have to waste time being with someone they do not accept. They're not going to point out every single flaw. They're simply going to point out what is necessary. My question is, would you rather the individual be oblivious of their major issues and hurt others in return? You see, the whole problem with this argument of theirs is that if an individual doesn't accept their partner, isn't that a bigger sign that they should not be in that relationship as a whole? Next, they also mentioned something along the lines of their partner matching their interests and genuine compatibility. But here, we are not talking about preferences in terms of matters such as interests, like they mentioned, favorite movies and all of that. We are not talking about that. We are talking about the aspects that involve growth, matters that affect others emotionally. Therefore, it is completely irrelevant in today's debate.
Please.
Yes.
The destination is perfect on our side if we choose the right journey. Their journey is something flawed in the first place and you get no good outcome. What is the logic in this statement?
You see, that's the whole problem with your narrative. You are pushing for the narrative of perfection to achieve perfection. But the motion clearly emphasizes that it is not about perfection. We are not aiming for perfection. We are aiming to get better, to growth. We are incapable of becoming perfect as humans. We are incapable of achieving perfect relationship. There's no such thing. As I was saying, therefore, it is completely irrelevant in today's debate, talking about the interests. If someone doesn't accept their partner's interests, they shouldn't be together because they have to be able to give and take. They don't have to change everything about themselves, but they do have to address major issues that bring heavy impacts to not only them as an individual, but to the relationship as a whole. Next, they talked about dependency and expectations that growth comes from the relationship. But it is not like these partners will be together all the time. They do have time alone to reflect by themselves and come up with their own opinions. They're not being forced to do things in a certain way. Going together only ensures that they are not in the fight alone at all times. Partners guide each other, not force each other into changing. And the incentives that the individual has is they would want to see their partner do well. No partner would just let their partner have bad habits and deal with it on their own and all of this basically defeats the purpose of a relationship, which is to forge an emotional connection and have a support system. Next, they talked about how people should focus on their own personal growth. But what makes personal growth better than growing together? Yes, they can grow on their own when they have their alone time. However, if they completely grow on their own, it defeats the entire purpose of a relationship, as I've said earlier, which is to support one another. If they do the work alone, it makes the entire relationship shallow, as it loses its values since they lack deep and meaningful conversation. What's the point in a relationship if you can't discuss your flaws, you can't discuss all these issues? And they also talked about going into a relationship after going on their own, but they don't realize that that going into a relationship with an idealized version of yourselves makes it seem like they're alone in the relationship. But we have to realize that a relationship takes two people. They also talked about how it avoids to it's better to avoid emotional dependency, but this only makes the parties avoid confrontation and feel uncomfortable with having these important conversations because they would want to avoid conflict. But sometimes conflict is necessary for them to grow. I'll be elaborating further in my argument. Now, for my argument, first, let's talk about the current status quo. In romantic relationships, many couples face issues in regards to the character or problems that their partner has. Now, why does this happen? This happens because there's a lack of understanding amongst the two parties. It may also happen because they may feel like they're alone in the relationship and that everything they do is wrong. However, this issue can be alleviated by considering the grow together narrative. See, when couples prioritize this narrative of growing together, it creates kind of a check and balance system. And the reason why I say this is because both parties can keep each other accountable for their negative actions. To illustrate, when one partner realizes that the other has a bad habit of interrupting others when speaking, they're able to point it out in an appropriate manner and offer advice if asked, so that the partner with the bad habit can improve themselves if they deem it necessary. You see, the reason why pointing it out is important is because it allows them to improve not only themselves as an individual, but their bond in the relationship because it prevents them from hurting their partner unnecessarily. Another thing to consider is that change can't always happen alone. Yes, these are two different people, but a relationship is about how these two individuals grow together and accommodate to each other. This is because a relationship is not merely a superficial relationship. It's a lifelong journey if these two individuals plan on staying together. Therefore, they need each other to stay accountable for
POI,
their
please.
actions. No, thank you. Because other people, outside people, are not going to point out the flaws in a person because they do not have the incentives to do so. And they would want to avoid conflict because they may not know the person enough to be helping them grow. And whereas their partner would have the incentive of wanting a better relationship and to see their partners prosper and be better. This is because in the long run, their partner's character and achievements will affect them. Therefore, they have all the reasons to grow together. Let's talk about why this check and balance system is important. Now, firstly, it promotes open communication, which is a vital premise in any relationship. This is because open communication allows them to better navigate misunderstandings, and this narrative of growing together promotes this exactly. Think about it. If they do not grow together and guide each other to being better, it will only lead to them avoiding confrontation. This check and balance concept is also important because as humans, we tend to be oblivious when it comes to our behavior. And this is incentivized by human nature, which is ego and pride, where we choose to overlook the fact that we have certain bad habits. Therefore, our partners can nudge us into the right direction. The incentives that we have to consider their opinion is that we would want to maintain the bond of our relationship and we would want to provide the best version of ourselves in the relationship. Therefore, it's clear that the benefits of growing together are immensely vital and have little to no harms. You see, government keeps on talking about how it's better if these individuals grow on their own. But how would this happen when not all people are aware? Not all people are aware of their traits. However, outside perspectives can give them enlightenment, can humble them, can ground them, can make them aware because these outside people see it from different perspectives, and it should be the partner because these partners want to see their partners prosper and they have all the incentives to do so to grow together. Therefore, we from the opposition proudly oppose.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech. To wrap up the propositional side, calling upon government whip. Here.
Okay, give me a second. Let me just. All right, so let me make this clear. Can everyone hear me?
Clear and loud.
All right. So I'll take POIs verbally. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, so the problem in today's debate is not about whether two people should be meant for each other, but instead should be about whether this grow together narrative is a good thing in the status quo or not, right? So allow me to clarify my case once again, and that we do concede that it is perfectly okay to be imperfect when going into a relationship, and how by personally growing in a relationship is also accepted, right? But we tell you that it is not all right to simply continue a negative relationship simply for the premise that with time it might change, okay? So rebuttals. So from the first speaker, they fed us the idea where, a relationship should be about the journey and the challenge overcoming, right? But we tell you that this is clearly not true, because at least on our side, if the destination of a relationship is not favorable, we tell you that in our side it is okay to part ways, right? A premise which side opposition does not have in the world. So your side also mentioned on how commitment is the only short-term idea for our side, but we tell you you are wrong in two different ways. We tell you that we also have commitment, but in the right thing, right? We tell you that if a relationship is simply not working out, we tell you that there would be, no incentive for them to continue growing to grow together, right? And if the relationship is harming both individuals, then we believe that commitment should only exist on the right thing and the right partner, right? So your side also continually mentioned on how relationships can be mended by simply having the understanding by simply understanding the partner. But we tell you that what if they have already tried to work things out, but simply couldn't come to a good conclusion, right? Then you come here and tell us that you should then continue to attempt futile ideas to the relationship, whereas on our side we tell you that it is okay if things don't work out, and if side opposition has been confused about their case, right? And that is that relationship should work out in the end, and that all relationships should work out in the end. And if that was the case, right, then your case would stand. But unfortunately, we live in reality. So side opposition also mentioned on how the narrative can help change the individual's flaws. But we tell you that one, not everyone changes as you claim to be, right? And two, then if your side actually feeds into a society where if the opposite partner doesn't want to change, then the narrative tells them to give more time until they do. But what if they never do, right? So then what does the narrative stand for, right? So you also mentioned how some change can't happen alone, but we tell you that the idea of a relationship shouldn't then be built on personal change simply because of the idea where change doesn't happen alone. And also, I believe your side seems to be confused about the imperfection of a person with everyday bad behaviors, right? Sometimes things like look and overall nature, which was already ingrained into their mind as soon as they're born, simply cannot be changed by like a little constructive criticism, right? And now onto my clashes. So our first clash is whether a grow together narrative is a good or bad thing in a relationship, right? First off, let's understand what is a relationship in the first place. A relationship is when a person likes another person, and all that cheesy stuff. But the idea of the premise here is an interaction where both individuals are willing to abide to a lifelong commitment of supporting each other, right? But we tell you that the grow together narrative is anything but that. The grow together narrative suggests an idea where one, a person doesn't need to be ready for a relationship to start one. And two, this narrative simply suggests that by going into a relationship, you can be reliant onto the other person for personal growth, which in our world, we do not think that should be the definition of a relationship. You do not go into an exam without studying and say that you can simply adapt to the questions in the exam without prior knowledge, right? We simply don't think that makes sense. Instead, we suggest an alternative, and that is we think that if a person wants to go into a relationship, they have to be at least in any way ready, right? And we do concede, and when they get into the relationship, the person should not expect to be able to come out of the relationship or to be in a relationship and have personal growth, right? We don't think that's what a relationship is, okay? But we do concede to the fact that it is okay for someone to get into a relationship without prior knowledge, but we do not believe the idea that if the relationship were to escalate down a negative or toxic path, then both individuals should stay and continue to try for this relationship until God knows when, right? As a narrative suggests. But no, we tell you that one, not everything works out in the end, and two, that's okay, right? That is okay to move on. So side opposition should not bring any case of the narrative in which it does work out, because we tell you that one, it is irrelevant to today's debate, because obviously if it worked out, then none of us will have to touch on this. But two, the main premise of today's debate is not on if the grow together narrative were to fail. So those two individuals should continue in hopes to change, or should they just simply stop to prevent more harm from occurring in the first place, right? Sure.
POI, please. POI, are you accepting it?
Yeah.
All right. If relationship shouldn't involve growing together, does this mean people should avoid vulnerability or asking for support from their partner?
We tell you that a relationship should not be built on the idea of simply growing together, right? The relationship can be anything more, but we do concede to the fact that the relationship can show, as you mentioned, show vulnerability, and that someone can be vulnerable in a relationship. We never deny them of that idea, right? So now, why is this so impactful in today's debate? We tell you that this grow together narrative isn't a utopian world, but instead a double-edged sword, right? We tell you that if it works out, then it will prosper, but if it doesn't, then it continues to pursue down a narrative in a hopeless relationship, it will bring only harm to both the individuals, right? Allow me to paint a picture. Imagine a relationship that was built on a toxic spectrum where clearly both individuals don't want anything to do with each other anymore, right? So now side opposition comes here and then paints, and then tells us that how it is better off that they give it time to try to discuss and to try to make things work, right? But instead of just parting ways. And side opposition cannot come here to tell me that their case that everything in a relationship can simply be solved by discussing it out, because more or less of those discussions, as of the current status quo suggests, leads to our side's narrative, and that is separation, right? Whereas on side opposition, what we need to hear is definite proof and explanation on how the narrative of grow together can actually save a hopeless relationship in both the worst and the best case scenarios, right? Which your side guarantees, and will your side guarantee a better world for our stakeholders? And can your side have an idea in which a relationship should be built on reliance, right? Okay, case comparison. So on our side, we have defined to you two things. What actually makes a relationship a healthy and happy relationship, right? We have told you that this is a relationship built on emotional stability and mutual respect. And we do concede to the idea that personal growth can happen in a relationship. But we tell you that if you go into a relationship expecting personal growth, then we tell you that it simply is harmful, right? We tell you that on our side that we will be able to build a society that is built on the importance of self-improvement and self-change, instead of seeing a relationship as a mean to improve oneself. We tell you that the narrative of growing together often leads to a relationship where one person over-relies on the opposing partner, which only leads to the partner being burdened, right? We tell you that this is not how a relationship should work out. Yet side opposition simply not engage with this substantive. And you can't come into this debate and tell us that as long as you follow the grow together narrative, all relationship will work out, right? Whereas on our side, we cater towards a more healthy narrative in which is built on the idea where a relationship should not be built on the idea of getting into one relationship and continuing to fight for that relationship until the end of time, right? We tell you that it is simply irrelevant and illogical. And on top of that, we tell you that on our side, we also advocate for a world where individual growth can happen without the need of a partner. We also tell you that your narrative of growing together will simply harm the status quo. We tell you that the narrative will cater to the belief for a relationship should be built on reliance, and is not the case, right? So now side opposition, however, continues to rant about the idea where a relationship would be shallow without the ability if a partner cannot help the other person grow. But we tell you that the definition of a relationship is already flawed on its own. So a person does not need to have to grow in a relationship for that relationship to be considered good, right? Okay. Onto summarization, right? So we tell you that relationships can come with personal growth, and it doesn't have to. We tell you that relationship can come with a personal growth, and that a relationship should not be built on the idea of an unrealistic expectation where everyone is expected to grow when entering a relationship. Before that, I'll take one more POI.
Earlier, you mentioned about how it puts a burden on the partner, or they rely solely on the partner. But how can you prove that when someone handles all their flaws and problems on their own, the burden is not put on themselves?
We tell you that self-improvement is important because just because, right, it actually puts a burden on yourself to change oneself, that doesn't mean you have the right to actually push it to somebody else, right? And that is the case that your side is trying to build upon, which I don't think is quite fair, right? Because one, sure, we do concede that, changing yourself if you are bad is hard, right? But we tell you, you still do not have the right, you still do not have the consent to push it onto somebody else. Okay, and with that, I'll end my speech.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech. To wrap up oppositional side, calling upon oppositional whip. Here.
All right. Hi, I'm Oppo Whip. I prefer my POIs verbally, if you don't mind. But if by any chance I'm a bit too loud, I can't hear you, feel free to ask me in the chat box. I'll assume that I'm nice and clear and continue on with my speech. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Everyone wants to live on top of the mountain, but all the happiness and growth occurs while you're climbing it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Grow Together narrative is truly the embodiment of the essence where we as humans cannot expect ourselves to conform purely to the ideology of being our perfect self in all aspects, especially not in relationships. Love is not about loving someone because of a certain good attribute that surfaces. It's about swimming down to the depths of the waters and witnessing the horrific number of ships their waters have brought down, yet still loving them. Perfection is never a reason to love someone. Understanding, however, is. Self-improvement is important, but so is mutual growth in a relationship. Panel, the government bench will lead you to believe that we should regret and be against the Grow Together narrative, but I will be more than happy to prove to you exactly why that narrative is the essence of a healthy relationship. Should people stay in a relationship to grow through challenges, or should they prioritize compatibility and leave when issues arise? But in the end of the day, just like how there isn't a true form of perfection, as both sides can agree on, there is no true embodiment of compatibility. Compatibility is simply an illusion men have created to purely console themselves or use it as an excuse when relationships tend not to work out, purely because they don't commit nor put any effort into the relationship. A relationship should contain the evolution of two individuals, both working together in a mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional aspect. Now, the first speaker has come forward to state that apparently on our side, Grow Together narrative is an expectation that doesn't affect a romantic relationships well. In other words, applying a certain pressure to be expected to change yourself just for your partner. They're expected to be each other's source of change. First of all, I would like to make it clear as possible as clear as possible when I say change and growth is not the same thing. Growing together isn't changing each other. It's simply enhancing each other. Ladies and gentlemen, the growth narrative was never an expectation to begin with. It's the understanding that even though you don't like certain aspects in your significant other, it doesn't excuse the fact that the feelings you have for that person can be so materialistic. The government's bench speaker has decided to refer to the present status quo. We can do the same thing. In the present status quo, let's look at our generation, where it's normalized to call it love when you lose feelings for someone because of a bad haircut, because they don't act the way you want them to act, where they actually have techniques and formulas to have a romantic relationship, such as the 3-month rule and labels and etc. Is this really something you wish to call love? That outweighs the reference to status quo, saying that the narrative will lead to an unrealistic expectation. People all around the world call these materialistic feelings love. The only chance that us as a society can change our perspective of love as a whole is by taking this narrative into account. All because your significant other does things you find annoying or embarrassing. If you truly love someone, you will still love them. That is what we are saying. That is our stance in today's debate. The people to have this perspective of love in our generation, which is the future of the society, of the global society, completely outweighs those who view love as some completely unconditional. Thus, that is why we have to support the narrative, the Growing Together narrative in romantic relationships. He then went on to say that relationships are not about growth, but about the bond itself. But how does that bond become stronger in the first place? There has to be a bond when there is growth. Therefore, you can only make such a statement. When you do that, you are literally saying we do in fact need growth. Growth and a loving bond between two beings is interdependent on each other. One cannot be there without the other. End of discussion. And you need to respect, and you need respect, you need a bond. And most importantly, you need to be able with someone and to grow with someone, to be in love with them. Now, moving on with the second speaker, he said that individuals should focus on individual growth and not grow together. An individual and a relationship are two completely different things. A spoon is a spoon, a fork is a fork, but together you don't call them that, you call them utensils. Just like that, we do need individual growth. That is not refutable, but we are not prioritizing the before section of getting to a relationship here, but actually being in a relationship in the first place, all because you are a developed individual who's happy with your own growth. That doesn't mean that your relationship will still be
Point, please.
fruitful. Yes, please.
A fork and a spoon is something that is necessary to be together. I don't understand how there's a logical illustration on your speech.
It's not a logical illustration, it's just an analogy. Please don't attack my analogy, attack my statements. Thank you for your POI. Just like how when you insert yourself into a relationship, the relationship itself has to grow. How do you do that? By growing together. together. The very fact side government has made such statements and relied on them, so it proves they are in fact taking on the role of the devil's advocate in today's debate. We say you achieve a healthy and fruitful relationship through growing the relationship itself. To grow the relationship itself, you grow as individuals together. All because I'm emotionally mature, it doesn't guarantee I'll be able to handle a relationship. Well, no matter how emotionally mature I may be, but when him and I successfully grow with each other through the relationship, throughout our relationship, that is when I can ever truly say or admit I am in love with that person. That is not a source. This is not a source of change or support. It is simply growth. Rephrase our words all you want, but in the end of the day, the only thing that stays consistent is change. Hence, the only way a relationship can keep up with change and struggles is to evolve. Oh, and just to something to take note of, he never gave proper proof for how emotional deterioration happens and how the relationship can burn out can happen. If you wish to make such a strong statement, you
PY.
will need to support it. Declined. And lastly, the third speaker, he says that if the destination is not favorable, you can part ways, something we lack that they don't. Excuse me, no one today is stripping the rights of those out there to end a relationship when they see fit. All we say is growth is what adds value to the relationship. If you want to part ways, fine, you can do that, but the opposition still hasn't been able to differentiate change and growth. We are not confused. You are. Change is to directly modify something or someone. Growth is to evolve. Declined. You put words in our mouths, yet you don't truly understand the words coming out of your own. A relationship is not an exam. Love is something you don't ready yourself for. It's a natural force, and when it happens whether you like it or not. You can't afford to control it. We haven't said, don't say, and never will say that a relationship evolves around change. Not change, but growth. Something the world of the government bench does not only lack, but is completely stripped of. Aristotle himself viewed love as a partnership of mutual growth, where both individuals contribute to each other's flourishing. It's grounded in virtue. You can only ever truly have a long-term growth as an individual or the relationship when you grow together. You can know of the person you love. You can just know of the person you love. You have to know the person to be in love with them. When the grow together narrative exists, that only encourages couples around the world to put in the effort, commitment, compromise, and communication. It's not so much about whether the relationship works out or not, but more about the quality of the relationship. Even if you take us at our worst case scenario, let's say that the couple does depart, at least when they grew together, they grew as an individual. They still benefited from the relationship. Whereas on their side, best case scenario is basically having the relationship become toxic. And to that, I only say one thing. There will never be such thing as love at first sight, because that's not what love is. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's an obsession, but not love. Through this narrative, couples take into account challenges that they will face. And if they have each other, it will only ever be enough. You can only advise an individual, but no matter how much you truly want to drill something, a concept into their head, growth is just another word for evolution. You choose, panel. Do you want an evolving relationship or one of stagnancy? Focus on the journey, not the destination. With that, I end my rebuttal. Thank you.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech to give the biased oral adjudication from the oppositional side, calling upon opposition reply. Here.
All right. Am I audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
All right. I will be starting my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Both sides of the House can agree on one thing, and I'm pretty sure that we on the opposition and government agree that we need way for personal development in a relationship. But what makes the opposition win today is that we give way for personal development, but at the same time, we also allow vulnerability and allowing the partner to achieve a mutual understanding. And this has not been proven by the government side. Now, allow me to list out as to what the government side has already provided. First of all, the government side keep mentioning and focusing on emotional deterioration and relationship burnout. However, the government side has failed to prove and give a certain mechanism on how to overcome this, and at the same time, they fail to prove as to why this is true. So, we on the government side have provided rebuttals whereby we said that emotional deterioration and relationship burnout can never happen. And this is because through growing together, we have mutual understanding about how the other partner is. And thus, how would we ever get tired of our partner if we already have a mutual understanding that they are like this? and we don't even set them at a pedestal at all. Secondly, emotional deterioration won't happen because if the relationship is already based on a mutual understanding and we understand our partner completely enough, the emotions are always stable. And lastly, what the government keeps galvanizing over is that the opposition has not provided room for personal development. However, we on the opposition today have already proven that we have room for personal development as well. And what this comes to what we on the opposition have shown today. One of the arguments provided by the opposition team is that through the check and balance system, humans, as we have stated, humans have egoistic tendencies, causing us to ignore our flaws and to protect our ego. And therefore, our partners who give and come and offer us an outside perspective, this outside perspective doesn't only ensure that the relationship is fruitful, but this outside perspective is also for the partners to improve themselves. And therefore, personal development is in fact fostered if we are going through this grow to narrative. Secondly, as we have stated on the government side, it is incentivized by wanting to see their partner do well, and thus this will make the relationship fruitful. And this has been failed to be proven by the government side, because in the end, the government side has been striving for perfection. However, perfection can never be achieved, because in the end, we are all human beings trying to complete each other just for the sake of love. Now, the other things that we have stated on the opposition side is that we can navigate misunderstandings. And the mechanism that we have provided and the government failed to rebut it is by having a couple counseling session whereby partners can learn more about each other. And by learning more about each other and their flaws, they can use it as a way for them to develop their own personal development, at the same time ensure that the relationship is fruitful. And thus misunderstandings can never happen. And there won't be a barrier for them, and this won't be a barrier for them anymore. Secondly, we have also stated, lastly, we have also stated about the fruitful outcome in a relationship, which the government doesn't have, because we focus on change. We focus on the journey, not the destination. Why do we need it again? As we have stated, this is because we are not chasing time. We are not chasing time, but in fact, we want the outcome to be fruitful. And therefore, in order for the outcome to be fruitful in long-term relationships goals, the only best way for this to be achieved is by growing together. And the mechanism that we have provided is by emphasizing on communication for mutual growth. Because as we are growing together, we will be emphasizing on communication, and we would not be putting them on a pedestal. And this is how we do it, which is through certain relationship courses, such as marriage courses. And therefore, as the government tried to prove today, whereby the boundary will be crossed, there won't be any self-respect. But ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, if we are in a relationship, we are already susceptible to the fact that we have to be accepting of our partners despite whatever their flaws is. And the only best way to learn about this is by growing together. Thank you.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To finally wrap up this round, calling upon propositional reply. Here.
I'm audible, right?
Yeah, clear and loud.
Okay. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. A few clarifications that's needed to say. The funny thing about Oppo is that most of their substantive analysis comes at third speaker, which comes off as a desperate attempt to save your team's sinking case line, which should have appeared in DLO. I asked the opposition and panels one question. When will a partner decide it's time to leave? And when are you supposed to leave? Insofar as they did not prove with structural incentives on what are they willing to change and what is considered time to go, their case doesn't stand from the very end. Do note that commitment and all that lovebird stuff can happen on our side, just with a partner that you actually love, just with a partner that you're content with. That's why we've won this debate with our very own counterfactual. Let me walk you through a few key points in today's debate. First, let's highlight a strategic flaw in opposition's position. Their entire arguments from two speakers is based on the assumption that the grow together narrative is a natural and necessary part of a romantic relationship. They claim it strengthens bonds and commitment, but they fail to address how this narrative places undue pressure on individuals to change for the sake of their relationship, to change for the sake of their partner, often to their detriment. With our winning ideas, this assumption is misguided for 2 main reasons. Number 1, growth is personal and does not need to be tied to romantic relationships. We already already said that the constant expectation for each other to improve because you're not perfect for each other, yet you're staying, is detrimentally harmful. The opposition has completely neglected its harms, which we've demonstrated on that it undermines the emotional health and the autonomy of these individuals, whether they want to stay or not. Their case collapsed when you consider that love should be about acceptance and not a constant pressure to evolve, right? But secondly, on the principle of emotional autonomy and overforced growth, because the importance of emotional autonomy and the self-acceptance in romantic relationships, opposition glossed over this core principle, tried telling you that growth strengthens relationships, but they've completely missed out how this narrative compromises the emotional freedoms of individuals. We told you that emotionals in relationships should be spaces where people are valued for who they are, not who they could become at the end of the day. Opposition has failed to show why the expectation of mutual growth is necessary for a fulfilling relationship. They've ignored the fact that growth, when forced or expected, it turns to an emotional burden on them, especially when one partner feels inadequate to or incapable of meeting those kind of expectations. This is where their arguments fall flat, because the principle of emotional autonomy isn't just an abstract ideal. It's central to what you need. But even if you don't buy it, let me just talk about the real love versus idealized growth efficiency. Let's talk about it, because the opposition wants you to believe that mutual growth leads to longer, more long-lasting relationships. You're more committed. But this ignores how we already said that the growth together narrative, it masks a deeper incompatibilities and prolongs the unhealthy relationships. Because I asked you till when, right? They fail to engage with the reality that couples often stay together longer than they should, hoping for a change that may never even come. What you get in their side is people not straining themselves to stay with someone they can't even handle, to oppress themselves for their own partner's own actions, and that harms them, drifting into a suffering for no reasons. This doesn't have to happen anymore. Why? Because on our side of the house, we've already proven by rejecting this narrative, individuals, they now seek, relationships based on emotional compatibility, based on what they can actually feel safe with one, right? We've already showed you that love can and should exist without the pressure to grow if you're not capable of it. If I'm Mickey Mouse, I wouldn't want to force myself to date Goofy if he's the total opposite. I'd rather date Minnie, and that's completely fine. So that's why in our world, we free individuals from this burden. We allow people to actually focus on their own happiness. We allow individuals to choose who they want. In the opposition's world, relationships are defined by growth, by what's lacking in each partner and how they need to change. But in our counterfactual, relationships are all about the acceptance and the emotional support and stability. At best, we create happier, more balanced couples, and at worst, even, we prevent the emotional toll of staying in relationships based on the false hope of growth. I'm very proud to take this debate.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech. You may now cross the house. Thank you, guys. May I ask the other judges to proceed to Discord room number 1 judge deliberation.
Maybe can go to room number 2, because room number 1 were for the open category.